Welcome to the TMC water cooler, where we're all the people, and by all the people, we mean a few of the people from Bullpen. We're going to gather together, talk about some cool topics. That's pretty much it. With me today is Hendrik, my co-host. That's your cue to say something, Hendrik.
I didn't know we were doing that. Just thought you were going to ramble through the names, but yeah.
And Snickering, our real space correspondent.
Yo,
Angry Mustache, our A-Lod writer and proficient at losing Redding Tengu's CFC pilot.
Hello?
And Nanak Severin, who is a person who plays Eve.
Hello.
we love you, Nonrak.
Yeah, don't let any of the political scandal stuff happening right now affect Nanak.
I don't know. Maybe he'll have another hit piece put out on him.
Yeah, that'd be pretty fun.
That'll be fun.
So like Tech said, we're here to talk mostly about games, and some EVE Online and some real space news. But first, let's just go through the list of people. What have you guys been playing lately?
I've been playing Dark Souls 2 and Last Federation.
My computer isn't exactly the best, so right now I've been playing Rome Total War 2. Rome Total War, not the first one, because I can't run the second one, and Dota 2.
Snickering, what about you?
Well, after a couple of months of caring about school, I finally stopped caring and I've gotten back into Eve. I've also been playing a bit of Star Drive still, which is a 4X strategy game.
Is it like, what was that game? Tiberium Twilight or Imperium Twilight, whatever that board game is?
I'm not familiar with that game.
That's like a massive board game.
It's this huge board game. It takes on average 1 to 2 hours to set up. I've seen games legitimately go past 12 hours before.
Yeah, it's a huge game. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but it's on my list of I want to try that out. Nanak, what about you? What have you been playing besides getting yelled at?
There's a free-to-play FPS on Steam called Loadout, where you basically customize your guns. It's like Borderlands 2, except instead of finding guns, you make your guns.
And I've been playing a lot of War Thunder, a lot of World of Tanks, and a lot of Civ 5 lately, added with some Arma. So now on to the actual content, rather than talking about ourselves. PAX East just happened about, a week ago? 2 weeks ago? It was last week, right?
Who cares? It was sometime within the past month.
Yeah. And did anyone actually watch any of the live streams or presentations that Penny Arcade and company put on?
The Chris Roberts one was absolutely amazing.
Are you talking about the dogfighting module reveal or the actual PC gaming?
All of it, every single part of it. That entire experience was just a beautiful gem.
Yeah, so actually let's talk about that because that's on our stuff, our topics list. The Star Citizen Dogfighter module reveal event that they held before PAX. I think it was it was Thursday night before. All I can say is that you would assume a company that size with that much money and that much experience in, presenting a game and doing presentations and stuff would be better prepared. But from what I understand, it actually wasn't just on their end. It was an actual issue of technology where the patch server that they had set up in Boston stopped working a couple hours or an hour or two before the presentation was actually supposed to start. So they didn't have the actual proper build on the actual stage. They had to somehow link it to their Austin office, which caused some sort of issue.
And that's just unfortunate.
And part of that, though, is just an overall engineering perspective versus a marketing perspective. That thing should have been polished. There should have been no room for him to fucking karam into asteroids. It should have been a completely contained unit that anyone, anywhere, regardless of what you had to connect to, could have just plopped that on the stage and run with it.
Yeah, that's why I said it's kind of interesting that a guy who has that, background and that pedigree in games and even movies, messed up a presentation. And it wasn't just on him, obviously. It was on everyone else at CIG. You would assume Cloud Imperium Games would know that, hey, this is a pretty important presentation. Let's put on our best effort. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen that way. Some of the mocking was pretty funny. And some of the backlash against the mocking was even more questionable. Mostly because I guess people don't like it when you make fun of their game.
Wasn't Chris Roberts like literally drunk during the presentation?
That's what I've been hearing. Yeah, is that
Like,
he got drunk beforehand, or he was doing shots or something like that. I was I was a little shocked to hear about that, but I was also like, well, it's a fan event, so he's probably like drinking with some fans or something like that,
it could have been worse. He could have told somebody to kill themselves.
Yeah. If only we knew someone who did that.
Well, the thing is, for an event that big, you'd think that they'd run rehearsals with a test build, so they'd put Chris in front of a test build and say, okay, Chris, you're going to do this, which is pretty standard for announcements. And it looks like they didn't, because even if they ran a rehearsal, even with an old build, they would have been able to see at least some of the problems with the presentation, but they didn't.
Well, my biggest pet peeve about it was, as a presenter, or at least at a presentation, you have contingency plans, right? So they had pre-taped a, hey, this is all the bugs that we've been experiencing, like in kind of why we delayed stuff, and they didn't do anything else with like any footage that they might have had. They could have taken screenshots or actual like in-game footage of when the builds were working to just go, this is sort of what we're going with. That way you would actually have a physical or a visual presentation of what's going on while the guy in the back's trying to fix the server code or something like that, But they didn't go with that. It was kind of weird. And again, like I said, you would expect more from the background a lot of those guys have. But, I mean, what's done is done. There's nothing that they can do right now to fix it.
That's two different sets of skills, though. The ability to give a good presentation or to give a good trade show demo or something like that has nothing to do with how well you come up with a quality product or how good you are at getting funding. I mean, it's completely separate. And the funny thing is, if they'd pre-recorded something, there's tons of hilarious graphical bugs and other problems they could have put together almost a blooper reel and been like, hey, I know we have some tech issues. Let's show you some other tech issues that happened during development, and then end with a video of, and this is what it looks like when it's running on a good computer with a steady server connection, and just blown people away.
Well, they did. That was really the whole video that they did, was an actual semi-blooper reel of, like, there was, like, some issue where, like, the screen was tearing just terribly on one guy's screen. He was just kind of staring at it like, I have no idea what's happening right here, and this is confusing me beyond all belief. But it was just, that was it. And from what I understand, though, on the actual trade show floor the next day and throughout the weekend, the demo is actually fine and working well. So I do believe the rumors, if you will, that it was actually an issue with the server having trouble or the patch having trouble. But at the same time, you would think that there would be a contingency plan for that. But again, it's two different things. Like you said, it's a presentation and a tech demo.
Well, the rest of it was very well received after that. Apparently most people that actually tried it said it plays very smoothly, it looks very good, and it's a very different feel from a lot of other things on the market right now. So
yeah, also announced at PAX East was the new Civilizations game by Sid Meier's and Firaxis, called Beyond Earth, and I'm actually really excited for this. I've been playing a lot of Civ lately because of that announcement, and I blame Sid Meier's for a lot of money spent on his games.
So many people are actually getting kind of shitty about the Beyond Earth announcement for the simple reason that it's using the Civ 5 mechanics, where you have the hex and you have the 1 unit per tile system, supposedly. I mean, they haven't come out and outright said it, but they've kind of said it, right, in terms of military. But I am looking forward to a Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri that is modernized. It looks real cool, and uses the 1 unit per tile system.
I prefer the 1 unit per tile system as well. I think murder balls are terrible in a tactical sense.
And Doom stacks. Most importantly, it removes all element of strategy from building up your landscape and stuff. And that to me is the most grievous problem with Doom stacks is when you have a Doom stack, there's no reason to ever build a fort. There's no reason to do anything related to your landscape. Like, you always choose whatever landscape improvement gets your city a greater population faster. Choke points are virtually non-existent. And then Civ 5 is like, well, there's only 1 unit per tile, which means that choke points, like having a single archer or whatever sitting on a hill plinking down at guys while pikeman keeps them off of him, that's a valid strategic option. And I really like that. I really like the game opened it up to smaller civilizations, like more than anything else, because like in Civ 4, if your civilization wasn't production or military focused, you were pretty much fucked.
How do you win in a situation like that? I'm not familiar with the game mechanics for Civ 5.
There's different ways to win. There's cultural victories, and one victory that you can do, which actually kind of leads into Beyond Earth, is you build a space shuttle and then you launch it into space. That's the technological victory, I think.
Yeah, that's the tech. It's both tech and production victory, because you have to research the modules and then you have to produce them. You have to start the Apollo program, and that allows you to build to win the space race, and winning the space race wins you the game.
It's pretty interesting because they're going into a different star system, but would it be different countries like the U.S. and Russia being the factions that you play as, or would they be like these like future corporations that you see in other media?
It's more of the latter, because I believe Beyond Earth takes place several hundred years after what the lore is calling. And I'm not a big fan on most games with lore, but the way I saw the demo and the presentation explain it was they explained that they don't really talk about the past. They more so say there was this big incident and basically everyone who's out in space is out in space, and you are now the leader of that group who's trying to find a new way to thrive on a planet.
It is civilization in space. Like, the only way to make a game better is to put it in space.
I think Beyond Earth is going to be one of those games where I'm really looking forward to it. I like how they announced it in, what was it, April, and it comes out later this year. And so it was something that they had kept very secret and very quiet for a good while. Moving on from there, a couple weeks ago, we actually had an interesting shock as well, in which Facebook Incorporated bought out Oculus VR, much to the anger of the Kickstarter community. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
There were a lot of very angry people about that decision, which I just don't understand at all.
Yeah, apparently, what was it, a day or two after, a lot of Oculus VR executives were saying, well, we expected backlash, but we did not really expect death threats against our family level of backlash. And I gotta agree with them. Like, that's kind of absurd to have happen to you when you make a business decision that's for the betterment of your family, for the betterment of your company. In which, I mean, yeah, they made a couple bill out of it, but I mean, it's going to help the product overall, isn't it?
But that's the perception of the people. They think that like the Oculus is selling out to Facebook, and that the product in the end will be like much worse compared to what it could have been if they remained independent.
You have a lot of concerns in which people are like, well, we're going to have all these things forced on us. And from what I understand, Oculus is going to be completely independent. They just have an ownership much like any other company would.
There are legitimate concerns with regards to using VR technology to do targeted ads and sort of boiling down people into these extremely granular metrics, like how long you looked at certain thing, so that way they can tailor how long X ad should be on your Facebook.
Right, but that happens anyway with any other website and product. I mean, what was it? Deus Ex: Human Revolution had a Star Wars ad thrown in on a loading screen, and it pissed a lot of people off. You have Mountain Dew and Doritos promoted all the time, and people are like, well, that's only, crappy AAA games, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, it's going to be everywhere. Money is money, and that's the nature of capitalism and commerce.
Well, that's not so much what I'm talking about. I don't really give a shit about advertising, because whatever. It's more the violation of privacy that such metrics gathering could potentially sort of endanger, I guess.
See, I would have less of a problem, I guess, getting on board with this whole fuck Facebook thing, but people do it anyway. Like, that, people give up their privacy to that all the time. I think the advantages that Facebook has in terms of money, in terms of reach, in terms of new projects for Oculus, is potentially huge. I think the privacy aspect, you already signed that away. Like, that's not really such a big concern. That's something you voluntarily give up. They don't need to come steal your privacy. You already gave it to them.
That's kind of an important point to make, in that there's no problem with voluntarily giving up privacy. The bigger issue to me is because I mean these companies do this without your knowledge all the time. Google tracks your metrics without your knowledge and without you being able to affect it in any way. Uh, like even like you didn't voluntarily do it, they just hook a cookie into your computer and they track all these metrics, and it's harmless, generally speaking, obviously, but it kind of speaks to this weird cyberpunkian like erosion of public and private life that's really interesting on a sociological perspective.
But I do have to disagree a little there. The tracking cookie for Google and the Facebook thing is different because no one made you post on Facebook. Everyone has gotten on Facebook and everyone has voluntarily given them their info. When people get upset about like, oh, Facebook's newest privacy setting, everything you put on there is something you gave Facebook. The Google thing is a little harder simply because there are very few search engines to compare with, but the Facebook thing is you entirely decided.
Oh, for sure, and I'm not saying that is a thing that is the problem. It's more when it's background surveillance sort of material that is an issue. Because like if you use Google, then like if you just type a search into Google, then it installs a cookie in your browser that tracks your progress through the web. That both helps their crawler identify new web pages that it may not have already crawled, and also tracks a bunch of other metrics like how long you were on certain pages, the churn, that kind of thing. And it doesn't tell you anywhere, like you have to go digging for it.
But you're getting a better experience. This is my thing, though, is that you get a better experience out of that. I go on Amazon, I get ads that are relevant to things that I will actually buy. I go to the grocery store, I get coupons relevant to products I actually purchase. I would have a problem with it if it was not directly benefiting me. If this was just Google was taking this information and selling it to third parties like a bank or an insurance company or something, when those guys do it, I'm pissed because my bank doesn't need any of the shit it collects on me. But if Google's doing it, that's just going to be leading to better content that I'm more likely to engage with in the first place. I view that as a net win.
I mean, that's a topic for possibly a different time. I think Oculus made the right decision for themselves as a business, and I can't fault them for that. I do understand the concerns that people express where they're like, we invested money into you through Kickstarter, and we didn't really expect for you to just up and sell your IP or your business to someone else. That was kind of not really what was implied through your Kickstarter program or campaign. But at the same time, I mean, it's going to end up being better for the service and system.
I don't disagree with you, but the fact is that it kind of there was no point of Kickstarter, was that companies like Oculus shouldn't have to go to venture capitalists for funding, and here they are going to what is essentially not quite a venture capitalist, but close enough that it sets a precedent for people like, okay, we're going to get a bit of money on Kickstarter to get things going, then we're going to sell out.
Well, there's tons of companies that have big things on Kickstarter anyway. The purpose, in many cases, is not to fund something completely unique, but to get their patrons engaged. Which, yeah, they could definitely go to venture capitalists, but those guys aren't engaged. Those guys aren't going to shape the direction that product goes in, except maybe in a negative way.
Yeah, like there's a game on Kickstarter, The Last Life, or there's other games on Kickstarter who they already have a publisher and everything sorted out, who could easily pay for the money, but they're using the Kickstarter and the campaign to get people to donate money and to fund the game itself, which I find odd, but I mean, it's their decision, and if they succeed, they succeed.
In a lot of cases, you're getting the game at the same cost you would normally. For a lot of these, they're pretty much exactly what they'd be if you were to purchase them on Steam or something similar. But the big advantage of getting it there is that, I get more interaction with the developers. I potentially might have a say in how the game goes. I might be able to dictate some things that I want to see in the game. Whereas if I was just buying it off Steam, sucks to be you.
Yeah, that's a topic that you could discuss on Kickstarter in general, whether or not that's healthy or not. And I think we should talk about that at some point, because there's a topic we're going to bring up later about video games charging more for normal price games in alpha and beta access, which somehow gives them funding, and then they can then take that and sell the IP to a publisher, or help fund their game. And I think that's it. The Kickstarter model is a very interesting one. because I can't really recall anything prior to Kickstarter really being as popular as what Kickstarter does. And you see a lot more of it. Maybe that's just because of the age of technology and information we live in.
The closest thing that there was to Kickstarter was like shareware and like as shareware episodes, where if you'd buy like the first episode and then you'd get the next few episodes, right? But that's the closest that we had before Kickstarter. So, but anyway, we should shift on to the next topic, which is we're going to talk about some indie games. Specifically, I talked about The Last Federation earlier in the podcast when I was talking about what I'm playing. Basically, Last Federation, like I mentioned, is Star Control. You only play as a single ship. You play as a Hydra, as in like the mythical creature. You play a alien that is a Hydra, and your planet is destroyed and your people wholly murdered except for you by some fucking jerks. And you sort of lay dormant in their civilization for a while, and then you steal some spaceship and go into space, and it's your goal to put together this new sort of interstellar federation of races. The way it works is you go from planet to planet and you engage in diplomacy with other aliens. Sometimes you get into fights. Basically, you issue an order for your ship to move in a direction or along certain waypoints, and then like what he wants to do, and then you end turn by turn, and each turn is like 2 seconds, right? So it plays out 2 seconds, and then you get another turn, and you can alter your orders and stuff like that. So I'm enjoying it quite a lot. Arkan makes very good strategy games. I wholly recommend their entire catalog.
I mentioned it a bit earlier where a lot of games, it seems, that are charging for alpha and beta access. In some cases, they're actually charging more. So, for example, Elite Dangerous charges you $150 to get into the premium beta, quote unquote.
Planetary Annihilation, sorry.
Planetary Annihilation did the same thing. They charged $90 for alpha access. There's a lot of pros and cons to it, and a lot of the cons I'm hearing are more so from a consumer level, where it's, why are you charging me more for an inferior product, to access an inferior product specifically? What are your guys' thoughts on that? Because I mean, I think it's kind of crazy that they do that, but it seems to be working, and it seems to be just going on all over the place. So
I have a pretty good bit from Mavor on this. When I did my interview with him, which is basically that by charging that much, they ensure that the people getting into the alpha and beta are the people who will be playing the game and issuing feedback, because they have a distinct investment in the game.
Well, the con side to that, or the caveat to that, is there's nothing really saying that the developers actually have to listen to you. Because I mean, if you have a community of, like, say, in Star Citizen, where you're charging money, they're kind of doing it as well with charging ships and so forth before there's even a game to play. They're basically saying, they can basically say, well, there's 6,000 of you saying 6,000 different things. Why do we have to listen to any?
The big thing there is that you're right, it is entirely up to the developer, and the developer might not listen to you, right? And that happens.
We kind of saw that with Piranha Games and MechWarrior Online, arguably, where they didn't listen to anyone, and they kept charging you for stuff in beta. They were charging brand new mechs. Oh, you want this one? It's going to cost you, I don't know how much they charged, because I never spent money on that game. But it's an issue where the developer kind of doesn't have to be held responsible and it kind of ties into the Kickstarter thing, where the developer doesn't have to be responsible for the funds that the community give them, because there's no direct compensation. A lot of people were saying, well, you owe us money now for kickstarting Oculus or kickstarting Star Citizen or whatever, and and say the game sells out or the product sells out, they then don't really have to listen to you. They can go, well, no, F you, got mine.
I mean, that is true. So, but that's not really something that you can control. So all I'd say is that research the companies that you're going to be paying money to, right? Like, I believe personally, I haven't done Elite Dangerous. I did get Planetary Annihilation. I believe in Planetary Annihilation. I got it. I picked it up for $90. I don't regret it. I've issued quite a lot of feedback, um, and it's a very good game. It's improved significantly. They obviously listen. Um, for Elite Dangerous, they're obviously committed to listening to their audience and bettering the game. As far as like Star Citizen goes, I'm not so sure on that because this is Chris Roberts' vision, right?
Yeah,
So I don't
and
think
at the end of the day, like people have you just said, Chris Roberts, it's his vision. So at the end of the day, it's only what Chris Roberts wants, in which a naysayer could say that. And honestly, there's nothing that the community can do about it because if Chris Roberts wants, I don't know, uh, pointless flaps or glitter on his, ships, he's going to put it on there, and there's nothing you as a community can do other than say, well, we're not going to fund this anymore. But he's already got 42 mil.
Well, my issue with the paying to get into the alpha thing is that it would be one thing if I knew what I was getting into. A lot of the reasons that companies have semi-open betas is so that if they have a good product, they can attract a ton of people. If I have to pay X amount of money for an alpha, A, I'm obviously going to think it's better since I spent money on it. Anything you spend money on is very hard to convince you that it sucked. And B, if it did suck, great, now I'm out that money, and even worse, I know they're going to be bothering me for the next 6 months as the game gets released. I really don't like the trend. I wouldn't mind early access on a developer basis. For example, let's say there's a studio you like that has produced a bunch of other good things. You might get like an early access pass to get into all their alphas for the next year or something. I would be fine with that, but actually paying a lot to get into an alpha that may still suck is a terrible idea.
There's actually a counterpoint I want to bring up to this, is that a while ago we did a news piece on a game called Age of Ascent, which I think many of us at the alpha we went to. And the thing about that game was that, as a counterpoint to Star Citizen, they had their flying module already ready. When they did what is their super early alpha, what they did was they didn't invite people to say, hey, pay us money and we'll let you into our game. What they did was they went to certain groups that they think would provide them good feedback. And I think the groups they invited was Microsoft and Nokia, and of course they invited a bunch of people from TMC as well. And their publicity stunt didn't go too well because they tried to break the record of 6VDT at 4,200 concurrent players. They only hit 900, and their game started lagging very badly. But I think the way they've done things is kind of refreshing compared to this. They're obviously not a AAA game as it stands, but they don't charge you money for things. They choose their alpha tester group by how competent and how much good feedback they think they'll get back, and they have things to show for it before they start asking for money.
And I think that's the important part, is they have something they can demonstrate to you before they're like, hey, I want cash. This is why. Not, here's a great idea. Give me some money so you can see that idea. Or even worse, so you can see a shitty version of that idea before it's actually out in the wild.
I actually agree with them, because like the way Age of Ascent did it, like it allows more people to like see the game working, and more people will be more interested in it. Like with Star Citizen, people have spent more than 40 million on an idea. Like there's some like aspects that have come out, but there's nothing tangible. There's nothing for sure that this game will actually come out the way you want it to be. It could be a success for all I know, but it could also be a failure, which would mean 42 million was given for a broken dream, essentially.
So the general consensus is that the current system in which they can charge you for just an idea is a terrible business model for any consumer to buy into. But providing a tangible, testable product where you can go, I see this, I like how it looks, but there's more to be added. Okay, here's my money. That's kind of what we all agree upon is a better system on a consumer level.
Yeah, let's be clear. From a business perspective, the paying for alpha thing is absolutely genius, and whoever was behind the really big push for that absolutely deserves whatever bonus they got that year.
we're sort of like poo-pooing this whole paying a little bit extra for beta or alpha access, and I think we're a little spoiled, honestly, like a little entitled. Minecraft obviously was the first game to really popularize this pay in beta and then get the full game and then you get to watch as it develops, right? And the way he did it was you pay in beta, you actually pay less.
Yeah. So like with Bohemia Interactive, they did it with Arma 3 where they charged you, I think, $30. And then once the full game came out, it's like, all right, we're pushing it up to $60.
Yeah, and a lot of games do this. It is far more popular than the other way around, which is charge a lot for alpha and then knock it down as the price goes on, right? Looking at it from a consumer perspective, like, yeah, okay, they're charging extra for a product that's not done yet. I'm mad because money, right? But from a developer perspective and almost from like a sociological perspective, it's not really that bad to be charging extra money for an alpha, because they're trying the extra money is a gateway for people who will be passionate about getting the game. I think that that's a valid way of doing it. I don't mind that. In At least with regards to Elite Dangerous and Planetary Annihilation, their extra access was actually based around their Kickstarter rewards. They did that so that people could get into the alpha without saying, "Hey, we're fucking over you Kickstarter people who specifically paid more money in Kickstarter to get into alpha, but hey, we're going to go offer alpha to somebody for $20." Right? They did that specifically for a sort of consistency reason. As far as like Star Citizen doing it, because they're doing it where you have to pay five or $10 on top of however much money you've already paid to get
Well,
access to
that's
the.
after the well, the reason why they said that was specifically because they had a alpha or some sort of slot countdown timer, and that just recently passed. So now they're saying if you buy a package that gives you alpha or beta access, you just pay an extra $5, which I'm not really certain on the specific details on, but it's an interesting twist on the whole concept, where it's a $5 charge as opposed to a $50 charge.
Yeah.
So now, kind of diverging away from games in general, we're going to talk some science and some real news things because for whatever reason we cover that stuff that half of our staff don't really understand. But thankfully we have Snickering here today. So recently, a new Earth-sized planet was discovered about, what was it, 500 million light years away?
It's NASA says it's 500 light years away, and what's significant is that it's the first Earth-sized planet we've found within its star's habitable zone. The habitable zone is basically the area around the star where you can have liquid water. It's just warm enough that you can have liquid water flowing in like oceans and lakes. The Earth, for example, is in our star's habitable zone, and the Kepler 186f was found to be within its star's zone as well. And so
And it's a different type of star, right?
yeah, it's a smaller red dwarf star, which is actually the most common star in the universe. And because we found planets that are Earth-sized and around that area, it means that the life in the universe could actually be very common because the most common star has planets that are like the Earth.
There is one actually really cool part about this, is that most of the planets, the exoplanets we've discovered before this, tend to be much larger. It's pretty cool. We have enough tools now that we are locating Earth-sized ones. We had located a lot of much larger ones that were not going to be habitable for various reasons, but it's cool that we now have the technology to see Earth-sized ones.
And then added to that, because we're on space news, the issue in Crimea, which has been going on for several months now, actually led to an interesting standoff of sorts where NASA allegedly or actually confirmed that they're no longer working with the Russians to get items and people to the ISS, International Space
I think
Station.
it was just NASA can't talk to Russian officials or Russian Space Agency for everything except the International Space Station.
Okay.
So in practice, nothing really changes.
Okay, so like this doesn't really affect anything in general, because from what I remember, the Russians have the only active capsule launcher that takes people from Earth to the ISS and back in the Soyuz rocket. So I'm a little confused on how NASA's saying we can't talk to you about anything other than ISS.
It's kind of silly.
Everyone.
Like, it's basically just, we're not talking to you, except for the only thing we really work together on.
Okay, so it's basically a show of, we're just not going to talk to you because
it's like Russia.
Talk to you anyway.
It's like Russia putting economic sanctions on U.S. politicians who have no economic assets in Russia. It's just a show of power.
So yeah, it's an interesting turn of events, and hopefully by the next podcast we'll have more space news that we can go over. I know there's a lot to cover. SpaceX just did a launch the other day to the ISS, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and it's one of their cargo launches. I think it was delayed because of like an issue in the past, but it's on track, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, that's good because that means NASA's dream of having a 2017 deadline for, was it privatized space
Yeah.
ferrying?
Like to have like private space companies send astronauts to the ISS without the help of the Russians.
That's going to be huge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're going to have to use Soyuz for the next at least 3 years. So moving on, we're now going to cover EVE Online's universe, which covers Dust and Valkyrie, and of course EVE Online proper. All right, so moving on kind of from the skies to the ground with Dust 514, with the game that a lot of us either haven't played in a long while or don't like in general. The Planetary Conquest, which was Dust's equivalent to soft conquering, was all taken up by DNS, Dirt Nap Squad. Angry, you're actually doing an article on that sometime, right around now. Or Ultra, no. Sorry, it was Ultra. Ultra was doing that. But what are you guys' thoughts on an entire group taking over all of the conquerable Sov, where you actually have more of a blue donut in Dust than you do in Eve?
Well, the worst part is... Oh, please.
I don't think it's anything special, because the thing about when I look at Planetary Conquest mechanics, that the maintenance for Planetary Conquest is a lot lower than the maintenance for Sov, and not to mention that the number of people trying to compete for Planetary Conquest slots is not that high. What it does remind me of is Clan Wars and World of Tanks. Is that Dust and World of Tanks are both lobby games with a community warfare aspect, and the thing about Clan Wars is that it doesn't have very high participation. In World of Tanks, you have perhaps in Russia there's 1 million players online per night, and maybe 1 or less than 5% of them ever touch Clan Wars. And a while back, Clan Wars is a lot more rewarding than Planetary Conquest, in that Clan Wars will reward you with the premium currency of World of Tanks, which is gold rather than credits. So imagine if Planetary Conquest gave you Aurum rather than ISK or clones. And still people didn't do Clan Wars World of Tanks, and what happened was the Goon Clan in World of Tanks at the time on the North American server organized the NAP, not even as a protest, but just because they could, to essentially take over the entire map and distribute gold with a formula to the clans that were willing to hold it. Which eventually ended up with something like each clan would get a base 8,000 gold per day, which, if you know the World of Tanks economy, is actually quite a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because I played Dust for a while, and Planetary Conquest was stupidly broken in the sense that it was just, there was no point in doing it. And a lot of the big groups that did it right off the bat, once Uprising came out, when Uprising came out, which was the actual launch version of the game, a lot of them stopped playing either Dust itself or just stopped playing in PC and went to faction warfare or other, non-Sov conquering aspect of the game, and no one really sees any point to it. I don't think there's an actual significant bonus in the PI of that district on that specific planet in Molten Heat that is actually worth the effort that goes into conquering not only the system, but putting a pos in that system. And I don't know. Dust to me is a very strange game where there's a lot of potential and a lot of it has been unmet. And a lot of people complain that it's the game that's ruining Eve for some reason.
I think that Dust is a game that can be good, but so to sort of tie this back into the PC thing, I think the reason why one group conquered all of Planetary Conquest in Dust is because nobody gives a fuck about Dust because it's not a good video game. Like,
yeah, it's only Eve players.
Yeah, and it has the thing is, it has the potential to be a good video game. Like, don't get me wrong, Dust very much could be a good video game, but we're kind of running into the same problem with Dust that Eve has, which is, and I mean this in the best way possible, Eve or CCP has absolutely no fucking clue what they're doing. And so they're just kind of throwing shit at a wall to see what'll stick. And they keep just making really dumb design decisions and errors, and like sticking to this whole PS3 exclusivity thing. Like, yeah, I understand putting it on the PC will require a ton of time and effort, and opens it up more to hackers and stuff. But you'll also get an increased user base. All these Eve players that have PCs, obviously, because they're playing Eve, they'll be more interested in Dust. It's like they just keep making baffling design and business decisions about Dust. It's it's like a madhouse.
Yeah. Well, CCP has always been a company that we, as a community, mock for making really strange decisions. And they kind of take that in stride and with pride at the same time. It's kind of hurting them in this case.
I'd be curious to know more about the basis, because a lot of their decisions do seem a bit nonsensical, and they don't always publicly justify them. It would be nice at some point to just, I don't know, be able to get a more clear answer on what they want out of it and why things aren't moving in that direction, or if they are, why the hell they want that in the first place.
Yeah. And, Dust is going to be one of those games where we're going to keep an eye on it, but we haven't really covered it in depth on TMC in a good while because, like Teg said, it's just not a good game and worth covering because of a lot of the issues, especially the design. The one thing that really shocked me was how badly implemented the faction warfare for Dust was set up initially, where you didn't get to choose your faction. It automatically threw you on one side or the other, and you got nothing for it. It was basically just another lobby with a more restricted battle zone or, algorithm for the battles. And then they're like, oh, 6 months later, yeah, hey, by the way, now you can finally choose your faction. I was like, I understand Eve wasn't built overnight and it didn't become the good game that it is now, quote unquote good. Good being a subjective word there. But at the same time, Dust had a lot of the road built for it in Eve, and it kind of just ignored all that. And I think that's either a lack of communication on CCP Shanghai to CCP Reykjavik's part, or it's just because you have designers who don't know what they're handling and they don't know how to handle it. So, on top of Dust, the Eve universe is kind of being expanded with Eve Valkyrie. And Eve Valkyrie originally was supposedly going to be an Oculus Rift exclusive. That's the wording that Oculus used in a press release in coordination with CCP. But then it turned out it's going to be exclusive on Oculus Rift on PC. And it's going to also be on the Morpheus, which is the PlayStation 4's version of an Oculus Rift headset with its weird neon light bulb controllers and the PlayStation Move. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Because a lot of people were really excited about Valkyrie last year, and it kind of feels like the announcement with Morpheus being the other support and Valkyrie being on a PlayStation 4, a lot of the excitement's been kind of muted and pulled back some.
But because Facebook bought like Oculus, wouldn't Morpheus become more popular because of the inherent evilness that some people perceive Facebook has?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think a lot of people are excited for Morpheus just because Sony's past ventures, especially with VR and gimmicky type products. And I'm not saying VR is a gimmick. I'm just saying Sony's had a pretty decent track record with putting out gimmick products like the PlayStation Eye. Because I remember when the PlayStation 3 came out, you had this mat and you put a card down and the monster came to life on your screen. And that only worked on like 2 games. And then it kind of just disappeared and went to the background. I think Morpheus is one of those things where a lot of people weren't really excited for it because console games aren't really, a lot of people really aren't interested in the interactivity, like the Kinect and the PlayStation Move and other products. And because the Morpheus is tied into the Move, it's kind of weird, and no one really was looking forward to that anyway.
It's hard to say. I honestly, I don't think it's so much a matter of people like it being announced for both is bothering people. I think it's more just along the lines of nobody really knows anything about the Morpheus other than it's going to be the PS4's answer to the Oculus Rift. So it's like, why bother getting excited for or learning about a thing that there's no information for, right?
Yeah. I think Valkyrie was one of those games where everyone was excited last year, And as more information and news came out, people started to get the excitement kind of dropped down more. I don't know if that's just because of the longevity of like, hey, we're really excited. It's supposed to be out in 2014. It's now almost halfway to 2014, or we're 4 months in, and we have no more news than we got last year, other than it's going to be on the Oculus Rift and the Morpheus, and that's it.
Be fair, we did actually get an in-game rendered trailer that included gameplay elements, and having actually played Valkyrie when I went to E3 last year, it is just the base concept of it is a very addicting and interesting and fun title, and I'm desperately praying that CCP does not fuck it up.
Oh, I'm desperately praying for them to not screw it up as well, because it's a game where there's a lot of potential in it, just like Dust. And because of what happened with Dust, it's concerning to some people who are going, please don't screw this up again, because you only get so many screw ups before you start losing customers, and they've already been losing customers. And a lot of that actually kind of ties into the next topic, in which Plex prices are at a very high level compared to when I started playing in 2009. And CCP actually had to make a live event to dump more Plex into the market.
Which I guarantee that's not dumping more Plex in the market. They move, 4,000 Plex a day in JITA? Like, this is not even a drop in the bucket.
Plex prices didn't even reflect that at all.
Yeah.
The problem I think right now is that CCP have an issue where Plex is so valuable in so many different ways, with the dual character training, with the triple character training, with buying your own account subscription for the month, on top of the raw ISK value that you can then sell it for and get money for to then fund your war efforts. It's kind of needed. It's one of those projects or objects where you need to keep Plex under control.
They had pretty frequent sales. Like, I don't understand what happened. They had very frequent sales. In fact, there was a period for a while there where they were having a sale like every 3 to 4 weeks, pretty regularly.
Yeah, over the summer they were doing that, and I think into the fall.
Yeah, well into the fall. I think almost into the winter, and then absolutely nothing since then. We've just seen prices go up and up and up and up.
That's actually a really funny discussion, because there's a lot of theories about Plex prices, and they're all stupidly wrong.
So what's the right theory then?
Well, basically, the right theory that Mina has is that Plex prices are indicative of essentially the average earning power of a player in EVE, which is that for example, if you chart Plex prices out over time, I noted 2 really big upticks, not necessarily price upticks, but a change in the rate that Plex prices rise, and that happened during Incursion and Inferno, which is the 2 expansions where they introduced Incursions and Faction Warfare, which are both very, very lucrative and very, very easy activities to get into. And what that does is it puts the ability to Plex your account in the hands of the average player, and that's far more demand on Plex than ARM or dual training or anything similar to that.
Okay. So what you're saying is that or what Mina's concept or theory is that it's more about the players having a lot more money to throw around nowadays as compared to...
It's that more players have enough money to afford Plex rather than more players have more money in general, because if you look at the average, they said the average amount of money in a player's wallet hasn't actually grown by that much, and it's just Plex. The prices of ships and everything else have not changed nearly as much.
Just gonna jump in here with a controversial statement and say that maybe Plex prices are going high because nobody wants to pay a real subscription fee.
That's a very valid point of view, in my opinion. No, it is, because I think a lot of people are either disgruntled with CCP or they're not happy, and they're like, why should I give you real money when I can just make it in-game and deprive you of my real money and spend my real money on, Domino's pizza?
Right. My counter argument for that, though, is that if I work for an hour, I make enough money to buy several Plex. So there is little need for me to waste time in-game trying to make money if I can just buy Plex and use that to fund things.
Not... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Oh, is it? Not to mention that Plex is on average the most profitable way for CCP to pay for game time, because you can buy 3 months of game time for $40, but buying that through Plex is something like $55.
6 months of GTC is 71 some odd cents on Amazon, but if you buy that in Plex, it's like 100 and some odd dollars. And going GTC route is a lot better for you as a consumer, obviously, because you're paying less for the same amount. And actually, moving on, World of Darkness, after 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years of development, is officially shut down, and CCP Atlanta has been reshuffled. So what are your guys' thoughts? Because World of Darkness was a game where CCP bought the rights to it from White Wolf Publishing when they bought out White Wolf Publishing midway through the early 2000s, and then decided, hey, we'll make a new sandbox MMO, and nothing really has come of it since.
I think it's purely a business decision at this point. It sounds like it wasn't being very well managed, and it sounds like when Unifex and other people started getting involved, they were like, well, this is not going to go anywhere. We are just going to stop this while we're partially behind it. If I was a business manager and you had spent 6 years and had no marketable product and no timeline for when I would have a marketable product, I would have pulled the plug too. I think it was a good call on their part, but it really sucks they couldn't make this work. Like, it's a great setting. It would have been a really cool game, but thanks, CCP.
I really wish I could talk about it. That's all I'm gonna say. I really wish I could talk about World of Darkness.
Yeah, so there's not really much we can say on that. I mean, I find it interesting that they shut down a lot of work and production in that office and the scope, and they fired almost 100 people in the span of 6 months from that single office, and I found that to be kind of troubling. And then with the financials that came out at the end of last year, early this year, I don't know, it's more interesting to see how CCP is going to respond at FanFest to a lot of the scrutiny that they're under right now because of all the problems that have been going on, allegedly. And now, the final topic is the summer's expansion, which is the industry theme, which was recently announced. A lot of changes are coming to the industry, and a lot of the community are actually really excited and also kind of disappointed. So, Nanak, what's your take on it?
Delete fucking T2 BPOs. Full stop.
Okay. Interesting viewpoint. Snickering?
I'm not too familiar with the expansion, but I find it interesting that instead of mainly PvP or exploration based, this time it's industry based.
Angry.
Why aren't you guys fixing Solve? I mean, that's kind of a catch-all phrase, but from what I see of the patch changes, still doesn't change the fact that HiSec is still by far the best place to do industry, and you'd only move to low and null if you want to do something related with capitals and super capitals. Even as it stands, the best way to get stuff in null is still probably to make it in HiSec, because let's face it, so Perimeter has 16 stations that can manufacture. Most nullsec regions don't have 16 stations that can do manufacturing. Stuff's still going to be made in HiSec, jump further out to nullsec, and sold there, and destroyed there.
Well, it does look like the cost aspect to having multiple people installing jobs at stations will be good, and I'm hoping they actually do that based on trade hubs, so that, for example, if you're trying to install at Perimeter versus middle of fucking Conid nowhere, that it's much more expensive to get in Perimeter, period, regardless of how many people are there.
Because there's only so many slots, and there's only so much.
They're making it so slots are unlimited, and the production cost scales up with how many people are currently running jobs on top of whatever.
Still doesn't change the fact that there's 16 stations capable of manufacturing Perimeter. That even if you take 1,000 jobs and spread them out along the 16, it's not that many jobs per station.
It could be that if they switch it from a per station to per system, that would make it much more fair to people in nullsec, because that way having 16 stations in Perimeter wouldn't matter. But more importantly, you can't do anything research-wise inside stations anymore. It's all going to be run through the POS. So all of a sudden, nullsec is a lot more attractive, because if someone wardecks me, who the fuck cares? I'm in the middle of nowhere. Now if I'm in HiSec and all my shit has to be stored in a POS, yeah, you better believe I'm not going to be researching capital BPOs there. I don't know why anyone wouldn't just be going after everybody in HiSec. I would be curious to see what happens to HiSec research after this expansion.
What is interesting is that if they're going by the buy slots thing, it makes Amamake one of the better places in Eve to make things, because Amamake simply has so many stations, so many slots.
Right, but it's also PL's backyard, so they're going to keep that under tight control as well.
PL is going to make stuff there.
Yeah. Well, they have Brothers of Tangra, but they also have other systems that they can use. And they're not just restricted to Amamake.
As far as I know, you can still do research at HiSec stations, can't you?
No, they're going to change it out so that it used to be you could use scientific networking and you would do things in a POS, but you would keep the blueprints at the station. They're changing it so you cannot do research from a station. You do research from a POS, but there are not going to be standing requirements for anchoring a POS in HiSec, which is going to make a lot of excitement very, very quickly.
Well, I could have sworn that stations, there were specific stations that had research slots.
They've announced they're changing that, but they haven't given any big specifics.
Okay, because, they said they're getting rid of slots. Any station that will be able to build can run Infinity.
That's building, not researching.
So, that's the thing. Will that apply to researching?
No,
or are they?
They already said that's going to be entirely run through the POS, and research is entirely based on your skills for that side of it. It's whatever you can fit at the POS. There's only so many jobs that can be run based on the laboratories that are installed.
Yeah, on the POS. I mean, at stations. I'm interested in seeing how they're balancing this building and researching in HiSec versus using your own POS and versus using a station and the costs involved.
Well, you can't research in a station anymore. That's what they're changing. All the research is going to have to be at POSes.
Then what do you do with Caldari
they
Outposts?
have not said exactly what they're doing station-wise for nullsec people, but they've said for the HiSec stations at least, you will not be able to research in there.
Okay.
What this does means that people who have research blueprints already, good for you. People who want to research them in the future are going to find it harder, so you better start
yes
now.
and no, because you already had the POS problem where you had to anchor a POS because there were no slots anywhere in HiSec to do research, right? They were almost always taken up unless you were there exactly when the job ended. You would not be able to run a research job on any station in HiSec. By removing the standings requirements for the POS so that you can just dump a POS somewhere in HiSec and start researching, it actually makes it a little bit easier because that was already kind of what people had to do, and grinding up to what is it now? 7.0 standing with
1.0 per point of station security.
Okay.
That's a refining.
For anchoring you have to go up to 7.
It was a very high standing, right? And they're completely getting rid of that. So if you want to get into research, all you gotta do is go buy a POS, anchor it, get it blown up by somebody. But the point being, instead of having to grind for the rep, and during the whole time, having constantly buffing your social skills so that you get better at the rep grind, right? Now you can just anchor a POS immediately if you really want to.
Well, you don't even have to do that now. You can pay people with corp standings to drop a POS for you, and then transfer the POS over to you. Like a standings corp
that is though, looking at it from a newbie perspective, right? Because I was a newbie not too long ago. That's a very that's more of an advanced level thing, right? A newbie is just I want to do research. How can I do research? Well, I'm gonna have to anchor a POS, right? So he goes to anchor the POS and he's like, well, I gotta do a rep thing. And his immediate thought isn't, well, I can game the system by jumping into a corporation that has that rep or whatever, right? It's oh, I have to grind.
But this is gonna make so much more content though, in terms of stealing stuff, in terms of fighting people like this. It's funny, this is an industry expansion, but other than the whole taking over the customs offices, this is going to be one of the biggest HiSec fighting options known to mankind.
Oh yeah, and I think that it's going to make both industry and research for newbies a lot easier. And Because when you're a newbie, you just want to do something. You're not really too worried about like making money immediately off the bat. You just want to experience the act of doing something. And so far, everything that they've announced for industry and research has been a way to make it easier for the newbie to do something. I mean, they might struggle later on until they can figure out all the spreadsheet shit, but it's kind of like blowing up your first rifter, right? Like your first PvP, your first 1v1 PvP experience. Even if you die and you get potted, it's still like an experience, and it gets you interested in that sort of aspect of the game. So, and that's been the biggest problem with industry and research is just it's so stagnant with all the slot shit. So,
So now that we're kind of running out of time, Nanak, do you have anything to say before we go?
No, I do just want to say if people are interested in learning more about corp thefts, I would be very happy to assist people in this coming summer expansion.
So what you're saying is that you are actually behind a lot of the drama in Brave Newbies now, and you should be crucified.
No, I was behind a lot of the drama in other places that aren't Brave Newbies.
Okay. I will not take your word for it. Snickering, do you have anything left to say?
Not really, except maybe shameless advertise. Watch out for the next Eve is Real article, Wormhole.
You're actually covering wormholes in the next Eve is Real article.
Yep.
Nice. Angry? Angry Mustache?
Me?
Yes,
Okay.
that is your name.
Vote me for CSM 9.
Even though this is probably coming out after the elections. All right, we'll vote for you in the past.
Yep.
And
Vote
tag.
me for CSM 10 then.
Are you actually going to run for CSM 10?
Why not?
Okay. Tag a menace.
I have nothing to say other than TMC is wonderful.
So you're quitting in a week and joining Mark Scaris, who was actually supposed to be here tonight.
Yep, that's it. Goodbye. See you later. I'm out of here, nerds. I'm cashing out.
Yeah, that's it. So thanks for listening to the Mittani.com water cooler.